What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to episode 28 of Bound to Improve. My name is Lennon Eller.
And I'm Chris Pound, and the book that we decided to read this week was The Score Takes Care of Itself by Bill Walsh. Running a football franchise is not unlike running any other business. You start first with a structural format and basic philosophy, and then find the people who can implement it.
And that was a quote from Bill Walsh when opening up his book.
Yeah.
So what was the main theme of the book? Success is no guaranteed formula, but disciplined execution and a strong philosophy increases your chances. And in this book, we'll be breaking down the 5 sections that he presented and figure out how the score can take care of itself.
Yeah, but before we kind of get into that, let's talk about who is Bill Walsh.
Yeah, so he was a legendary coach for the NFL with the San Francisco 49ers, winning 3 Super Bowls in the 1980s, and he was the person who pioneered the West Coast offense, which was a strategic passing system that utilized short passing routes instead of the traditional brute force running game and then the long deep ball.
Yeah, he, like you said, he was the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers, the assistant coach for the Cincinnati Bengals, offensive coordinator for the San Diego Chargers, and then head coach for Stanford University. But his biggest philosophy was how he could teach people to become great. The first part here is my standard of performance, Bill Walsh's standard of performance, an environment of excellence.
Yeah, so getting right into it, the first thing that he said in the book was, to succeed, you must fail. Success comes through failure and resilience, which we've talked about so many times throughout our episodes. When setbacks hit, you have to take the time to recover, but then refocus and plan your next moves. This mindset determines whether you win or lose. And you have to, Bill Walsh's second season as the head coach of the 49ers, he had a losing season his first season as the head coach,
Yeah.
and then his second one, he had a long losing stretch, and he thought about throwing in the towel. But we're going to talk about here the 5 steps that he utilizes and he recommends utilizing for getting your head back in the game.
Yeah, first here is expect defeat. It's all part of the process. Then you have stop dwelling on past failures. It's mental quicksand. Allow yourself to grieve, but don't let it drag on. And then commit to fighting again. You're often closer to success than you think. And lastly, start planning your next move immediately.
Yeah, so those are some great things to do. And here's what he also recommended not to do. Don't ask, why me? Second is don't seek any sympathy. Third is don't complain or accept endless condolences. Fourth is don't blame others.
Yeah, so the next kind of part here we have, which was a big part of the book, which is the standard of performance, or for short, SOP. Success starts with a clearly defined standard of performance, a culture of excellence that comes before winning.
And he compared this to, it's like an automobile assembly line. Before you can have that one-of-a-kind car that's in top-tier shape, you have to have a great production line to build that car first. So Bill, when he was creating his team, he implemented all the right core foundations. So it was the mannerisms in terms of what they do on a day-to-day basis, how they wear the uniform with pride, how they put and take every little thing into account when running their routes. There's just small things like that that eventually transformed into winning.
A big part of this book was, again, the standard of performance, or SOP. And so how do you kind of establish a winning SOP?
The big thing here is preparation is key. You have to understand your organization and the actions and attitudes that are contained within your philosophy of leadership before you begin to frame it and start to implement it. So first, you can clearly define the actions and attitudes that drive high performance. Yeah.
In order to do that, you need to set high expectations for effort, execution, and expertise. Think about, back in high school or whenever you were on a sporting team, coaches would always say, practice like you play. Why do they say practice like you play?
They're trying to set the bar as high as possible that they know you can achieve. So when that time comes, then you're performing as close to perfect as possible.
Yeah, if you're lazy in practice, what's stopping you from being lazy in a game? And you may not even know that you're being lazy in practice, because if the coach doesn't set that standard, then you have nothing to kind of baseline it off of.
Yeah, it's the job of the leader.
Exactly.
Next is teach not just methodology, but core beliefs and values. Doing the right mechanics will only get you so far. You need to have that common thing that everybody is striving for, that why of the group to really push you guys to the next level.
Yeah, kind of create a culture of connection and shared responsibility. Kind of think about the Marines. When you ask a Marine why they do what they do, they say it's for the person to the right of them. That is the connection that is so important, and that is the reason why the Marines are the Marines, right? They're fighting for the person to the right.
Awesome. Moving into theme 2, success is not spelled genius. And he talks about in this is innovation, planning, and common sense. And the first thing we're going to get into is the lessons of the Bill Walsh offense. The first one here is success doesn't care how you get there. You have to innovate and adapt like Walsh's short passing offense. When Walsh first got into the league and stepped into his head coach position, he really started to implement that short passing offense, or the West Coast offense, which has not been done before. And everybody was like, you can't do that. Like, that's not traditional football. So he's not really winning in a correct way. And that really weighed on his conscience. But he still arguably became one of the greatest coaches of all time because, again, success doesn't care how you get there.
With that being said, be bold and embrace change. Fear of unknown stifles growth, and a great leader will push forward despite the uncertainty.
And after that, innovation should be proactive, not reactive. Instead of waiting for desperation to spark new ideas, ask what strengths are we underutilizing? And this kind of feeds in right into the next point that we have.
Great leaders, they find the upside and the downside. They obsess over turning setbacks into opportunities.
So the example that Bill provided in the book was one of his tight ends, Bob Trumpy, accidentally went in motion during a play when tight ends really didn't ever go in motion in the professional football leagues.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually caused the offense to lose yardage during the play because he went in motion when he wasn't supposed to. But one of the coaches after the game watched the film back and saw how when the tight end went in motion, how confused it made the defense. So even though that they probably reprimanded him for going in motion and causing the lost yardage on the play, that coach had the ability to turn that downside into the upside, which is what Chris...
You never quite understand when there's an opportunity until the opportunity comes right to you, type of thing. And for instance, that was the opportunity. It was a whole new idea. Okay, we can throw people in motion and kind of throw off the defense and really change up the look that no one's ever really seen before. And that was the idea.
And that came from a mistake.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the fundamentals of leadership, concept, conceits, and conclusions. First is knowing when to persevere versus when to pivot. Persistence is crucial, but stubbornness can be extremely costly. Leaders must balance perseverance with the ability to recognize when a strategy isn't working. So some examples here was when Bill was a coach at Stanford and he was playing Tulane. Bill did his research, and Tulane had a terrible run defense. So Bill's game plan was to run the ball. However, Tulane, they were making things impossible for Bill to get any ground game going. And that's where this decision comes. Do I persevere with my game plan? Because that's what all the data says. They have a bad defense, so I should keep running. Or should you pivot and try to see if something else will work?
Yeah, you have to be able to adapt, right? Because you're never going to know what the situation is truly like until you're there. And that was what Bill had to go through. He had to pivot. He couldn't continue trying to run the ball down their throat because obviously it wasn't working at all. He had to pivot. He had to change.
Yeah. The next leadership point we have here is good leadership percolates down. Your presence as the leader shouldn't be the spark. A well-led team should stay motivated with and without your presence. So you should think of it as a coach, even when he's in his office, the team should still be coming up to shoot before practice even starts, or staying after to get in extra reps. Having those leadership principles instilled from the top and have them percolate down to even so they're there when you're not there.
Yeah, have you ever kind of noticed how great leaders, quote unquote, have big ears? Why is that? Because listening is the foundation and the number one rule in strong communication. The second law is when you're not listening, ask great questions.
Yeah, and this goes right into the next point as well, is you have to, listening when listening, you have to prioritize the right way over your way. And this comes from listening to the people around you. So some examples that we have is first is a quote from John Wooden. Be more concerned about finding the right way than having it your way. Next here is, he called it like, be a king without a crown. Bill, before the game, he was like, if we ever get to the opponent's 30-yard line, I have a play drawn up that we're going to run because I'm pretty dang sure it's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they got to the 27-yard line and he completely blanked. So here it came down to prioritize the right way over your way. So the backup quarterback actually remembered that play. Even though the starting quarterback and the backup quarterback are like competing head to head, the backup quarterback actually shared with the coach, Bill, the play that they were supposed to run. So it was for the good of the team, or prioritizing the right way over having it his way.
Yeah. Moving on to part 4 here. Essentials of a winning team: the people, the priorities, and the performance. The art of managing confidence. Mastery is a process, not a destination. True success requires constant remastery.
Yeah, don't get complacent with success and think that you can slack because you've mastered it. And you see this countless time and time again. People get to the top, whether it's in sporting or business, and they think that they can just take the foot off their gas. But while you're doing that, there's cars in the other lane going right past you.
Exactly.
And with this, managing confidence, handling success is just as important as handling failure. As humans, we experience failure a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do have those successes time and time again, you can get what Bill calls the success disease, and then you don't maintain the same hunger that drove you to winning in the first place.
And it's extremely important to stay humble. Always try to be the underdog. Never assume victory just because the competition looks weak. For instance, think about March Madness. When a 1 seed loses to a 16 seed, why is that? It's because they assumed that because they were ranked a 16 and they were ranked 1, that they were automatically going to win. Now, unfortunately, that's not always the case, as we've seen in March Madness.
Yeah, you have to be able to manage your confidence appropriately. Now let's talk about the impact of the bottom 20%. Bill found that negativity from the bottom 20% can outweigh enthusiasm from the top performers. If those bottom 20% feel overlooked, their dissatisfaction can spread immensely
To the whole team. You need to make them feel valued. Helping them understand their role's importance can be the difference between mediocrity and excellence.
Yeah, so how do you make them feel valued? First, here's some key examples. First, you can be extremely clear in your communication of their role. Show them how they impact the team's or the organization's success. Next is public acknowledgement, or build a culture of inclusivity. So you have to value their opinions and you have to publicly shout them out almost to make them feel like their work is truly meaningful.
You have to almost praise them to an extent. Make them feel like they're making a big difference in what the overall team is experiencing.
Yeah. Last is personalized development. So you're probably coaching your top performers to a T, but also help out those bottom 20%. How can they also get to the next level? And they could even replace some of your top performers in key moments.
Bill has this idea of the most 4 important words in leadership, and it is a simple, I believe in you. This can be the spark that transforms someone's career, confidence, and contribution.
Yeah, it just builds fuel for performance. When a leader expresses confidence in someone, it pushes them to rise to the occasion.
Yeah, nobody has ever come back to you and said, thank you for expecting too little of me. So the question is, are you saying that phrase enough, that I believe in you?
Yeah, to your friends, to the people on your team, to the people within your organization. It's something that every leader should convey to everyone they work with. And wrapping up here is establishing a standard of performance. First point is to understand responses in context. A person's emotional state is key to understanding their reactions. So the example here is Bill was towards the later years of his coaching career, and he was in an interview. And his emotional state was not the best because he was extremely hard on himself, and he didn't see success as validating anymore. because it was so much pressure that he had to win a Super Bowl every year, and that wasn't enough for him or for his boss. So it was weighing on him extremely hard, and he was very emotional about that.
Yeah.
So during the interview, they started to bring up questions about the team and if they thinks that he could keep coaching, and he ended up just walking off the set because he didn't want to start crying.
Mm-hmm.
And then the news reporter misinterpreted as arrogance after all of his winning of his Super Bowls, but they didn't understand his emotional context behind the story.
Yes. Next point here we have is the performance rituals. Develop a ritual that prepares your mind to execute efficiently and effectively. The example that we had here is Bill had a pregame ritual that was meticulously planned to get him mentally prepared. It's almost like going through your brain and having a mental checklist of the things that you know you want to do and the things that you're prepared to show.
Yeah, this isn't just for like game time. This is before an important sales pitch and before a presentation that you have to give during school. Anything that you have to do, you have to get your mind right first before you go in so you can perform at the highest level.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we take a good amount of time before the episodes in order to go through all of our notes and kind of have key talking points. It may not seem like that all the time, but that's something that we do. That is our pre-game ritual. That is our pre-podcast ritual that we always do.
Yeah, and like even given we always give nuts too before.
Always. You guys don't see that, but we'll never show it either.
Something to help us get in the
mood, the energy. We got to get the energy right. We got to try and convey how we feel about the book. We're excited about this. We want to share this with you guys.
Yeah.
That's what we do. That's why we do what we do. It may not seem like a lot right now, but in the long run, it'll pay off.
Yeah.
You're bound to improve.
Yeah, and that leads in directly to our next point, is the power of consistency. What we're trying to do is little by little give you guys knowledgeable insights so you can increase your personal and professional lives over your entire lifespan. So, and this was a huge point in the standard of performance that Bill provides. Small actions lead to big results. Success is built on the little things done consistently over time. And that's all about what Bill implemented with the standard of performance. You have to build the right beliefs and culture system before the winning side of things comes into fruition.
Yeah, today's efforts, they shape tomorrow's outcomes. You have to do the things right today in order to achieve what you want to tomorrow. If you don't do what you need to now, you're not going to be prepared to do what you need to in the future.
Your standard of performance defines who you are. Over time, your habits and discipline become your identity and the foundation of your success. So what are you doing right now that you are cultivating your standard of performance to live up to who you want to be?
It's all up to you. It's your goals, it's your life, it's your dreams. It's all up to you. Go out there and accomplish what you want to do.
Awesome.
And this brings us to the implementation from last week's book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. For me, or for us technically, it was to get an idea for a newsletter/email list with an in-depth book review. This is something that is going to be an ongoing process, and we're currently just trying to get ideas and come up with a couple different things that could work, might work, probably won't work. And so we're still working on that, but we're excited to be able to get that out to you guys.
Yeah, we also want to increase our communications between us, as a book a week is a lot, so we wanted to make sure we're on the same page, and we wanted to start providing more constructive feedback to each other in terms of how we're doing throughout the podcast, what we need to do better for the next one, etc.
We're not perfect, but we're trying to push each other to the point where it's near perfection, right? We realize that it's not going to be perfection constantly, but again, in order to succeed, you have to go through failure.
Yeah. So for this episode, my implementation is I wanted to kind of lay out what my standard of performance looks like. This is something that's developed throughout a lifetime. And like back in previous episodes, we talked about defining our why and things like that. Like I have completed those things, but now providing a little color around that why and to start creating that standard of performance is what I'm going to try to do.
I'm going to redo it. Ready? Yeah, my implementation from this week's book is to break down my goals, my big goals, into more smaller, manageable goals, and to keep that consistency rolling. It's all about consistency, right? Like mentioned earlier, today's efforts shape tomorrow's outcomes, and so that's what I'm trying to incorporate into my everyday life.
Yeah. So now we'll hit on a few of our favorite quotes from this week. The first one I have here is, everyone who is a serious player knows what it takes. The difference is how much you're willing to give to get there. This is exactly what he's talking about, is your standard of performance defines who you are. What habits are you willing to take on that puts you out of your comfort zone, and what habits are you willing to get rid of to push you to that next level?
Exactly. One of my quotes here is, almost always your road to victory goes through a place called failure. That's life, right? You're going to fail. But that's not what it's about. And this goes directly into my next quote. When knocked down, you must get up and stand and fight. Don't stop. Again, like I've said before, it's your life, it's your dreams, it's whatever you want to accomplish in life is solely up to you. You have to go out there and you have to do what you have to do in order to achieve your dreams.
Yeah, and go back and go through Bill's checklist on what to do when the times get tough and how to take that next step forward. My last one here is, who knows what force gnaws at us, telling us that our accomplishments, no matter how sensational, are not enough, that we need to do more. And this was from Arthur Ashe, who was a famous tennis player. But this accurately describes what Bill Walsh was going through. He could not be satisfied with the success that he's amounted over time, because he always wanted more and more. And I feel like that sometimes I get into that mindset.
Yeah.
So just to be aware of that and not let it overconsume you, I think is important.
Yep.
That wraps up this week's episode of The Score Takes Care of Itself by Bill Walsh. Make sure to tune in next week where we read The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. It's going to be another great way to figure out what things we need to do or not do in terms of building a great business or building
An audience.
Building good life skills, etc.
Yeah, so thanks for tuning in. Check us out on Bound to Improve on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.